Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Accident Gamers. Today we're gonna check out a really sweet JRPG made by the veterans of the SRPG genre, Nippon Ichi Software. It's Pucelle Tactics. Now, Pucelle Tactics was originally released on the PS2, but then was remade on the PSP, which is the version you see here, exclusively released in Japan with new content. I actually picked this box up because I thought the box art was way sweeter than the PS2 version, and amongst all the collectible things you get in here, you actually get a really cool art book here too. And I really love the art in Nippon Ichi Software games, so that was another incentive for me to pick this up. Not only that, but it has some really cool music in it too. Without further ado, let's get to the review.
Pucelle has for the longest time been a very interesting title for me personally. It marks an entry point for the whole SRPG shebang Nippon Ichi decided to dedicate their whole development structure around, but it's also a game that would take me back to Nippon Ichi's glory days of old, where they wrote stories that were summed up to more than just repeated puns and paper-thin jack joke stories. The story this time around revolves around demon hunters that work under the Church of the Holy Maiden in their efforts to prevent the resurrection of the Dark Prince, which in turn will bring the destruction of the whole Earth, in the name of the fallen angel Calamity. While these plot points are present, they're more of key points in the story rather than the focus, as the story is much more character driven than anything. For what I was presented with, I was really satisfied. Churches are generally occurring in JRPGs and take the center stage from time to time, so most of you probably get the gist of what you'll be in for. The story is broken down in digestible chunks, and I felt like I generally got along with all the energetic characters on the screen. Like with the earlier Disgaea games, this game feels passionately made, which is immediately prominent after the first few seconds of booting up the game. The characters aren't just there to be laughed at, they instantly become very relatable and have established goals, which we know we'll see certain resolved to by the end of the game. This is in large thanks due to the script, but also because the game doesn't just feel like another doujinshi game with preset JRPG maker graphics, like a lot of people would argue Nippon Ichi games look like nowadays. There's a lot of event-specific backgrounds, and sprites that have an overall less manufactured look to them. They're all well animated and have distinguished personalities that truly radiates a fantastic quality. As with other Nippon Ichi titles, Tenpei Sato returned to provide the music for this game, and once again the music is great. I'm a real big fan of his work, so obviously I love what I heard. My favorite tracks included Martyr's March, the main theme, and The Great Wilder, the latter of which makes a return in Disgaea games in the future, and I was really glad to find out that this was the game that it originated from. While I played this game in Japanese for the PSP, the English voice acting is really great, from what I saw in YouTube clips. The translation is overall really good. It does take a lot of liberties and refines a lot of the dialogue, but I just think that works for the better. The art style is pretty much the opposite of Nippon Ichi's regular designs today. The characters look a lot more bulky and chubby instead of being a bunch of lollies. A funny thing to mention is that it's very easy to see that Nippon Ichi was very influenced by Princess Crown, a game developed by Vanillaware that plays and looks very similar to Odin Sphere, both of which I truly love. From the way you traverse the city in a simple line, the way you talk to NPCs. It even has a character that looks almost one-to-one with the main character from Princess Crown, even bearing the same title of a princess. But I'm getting ahead of myself. One thing I constantly do in these games is turning off the battle animations and making the characters move faster. That's something not all SRPGs have, but over the time Nippon Ichi actually realized that it's kinda necessary. It really saves a lot of time. It's a nice refreshing contrast to games like Final Fantasy Tactics or Tactics Ogre. And while those games are great in their own regard, they move admittedly too slowly for my taste. When you actually get to see the combat, it's really flashy. You get some really big sprites, showcasing some really cool animation, and some of the attacks look like they could really hurt, which has become a trademark thing for Nippon Ichi. For me personally, I always turn them off because I think the game goes a bit faster that way, although I highly recommend that people should check them out for the first time playing it through. They're excellently over the top. The game did more than just moving at a convenient pace. Aside from these fast-moving units, there were also mechanics in place that made attacking enemies or vice versa much easier. For example, when an enemy hits you, you are guaranteed to hit back, which made it so that you basically get 2 rounds in one turn. There's also an intuitive one more battle system mechanic, which in theory would allow you to move on forever. This was controlled by purifying colored panels. If one of your characters were standing on one of the colored panels that were getting purified, you would be granted one more turn. This will let you move indefinitely and deal extremely much damage to your enemy. It really adds a nice puzzle element which makes you think about your actions over for one more layer. It was undoubtedly fun and it also gave the game its own flair. It was all about rearranging the puzzle to your own favor, but the best part about it is that the system is obligatory. It's a nice, non-frustrating extra for people who like it, such as myself, and it really puts the S in SRPG. Similar systems would be revisited in Nippon Ichi's new games, like Disgaea with Geo-blocks and throwing, but I personally love this system better. You could also recruit enemy units by purifying and defeating them, sort of like capturing Pokemon. And while there weren't many enemies to select from, I can imagine personalizing your own army would be very fun, even if I did manage to blow through the game with the main characters only. I was surprised to find out that for a Nippon Ichi title, Pucelle had very little grinding. But just like with any other Nippon Ichi game, when you did have to level up, leveling up in this game was extremely fun, and like with everything else, it was also very fast and efficient. Since enemies endlessly spawn on the maps if you just give it enough time, the endless stream of enemies will become great EXP fodder. Sometimes I swear this game felt more like an action RPG than an SRPG. Really, I mean it. Because you move from room to room, and you don't really lose too much health per battle either, so nothing really hinders your progression. It's kind of like playing a dungeon in Zelda, but on grids. Another reason is that you can freely run from the battlefield by your own will if things get too rough. It saves you the trouble of having to reset the game from a game over, and it also allows you to experiment a lot more with your strategies, which is a warm welcome. I had a blast just approaching enemies with a relieving thought that I could actually just try again very quickly if things failed. I would usually just keep a character in my base panel for standby, and if everything backfired I could just run away with that character and try again. Seeing as this is an early NES RPG, it's unsurprisingly less polished than its younger brothers and sisters. For example, the ranged moves, while many of them have very limited effects on the battlefield. The game's AI is also not very smart. You can easily exploit them by using your lower leveled units as bait, since they usually attack the weakest unit first. And then you could just abuse their stupidity by beating them up with your stronger units. I guess it's sort of cheap, but at the same time, I think it counts as a strategy? I don't know. At the same time, the game does introduce subjects that weren't explored in further games from that point forward, like event panels on certain maps, and the possibility of getting different scenarios and outcomes for each chapter. Let me explain. Some of the maps you can visit are actually optional, which will lead you to true endings in various chapters. These scenarios will in turn carry a lot of woe-inducing insights on the characters and ongoing events, and it might just lead you to something like learning a new attack, and more. I found myself enjoying it a great deal because I got to spend a lot more quality time with the characters as they had to face more complicated decisions when they went through certain cutscenes. It also made me realize how much replay value this game actually had, since there were just about 3 possible endings for each of the chapters. Since the game was developed at a much earlier time than more recent NES games, it lacks the overall technical polish you'd expect. But when playing the PSP port, which was the one I was playing, it's surprising to see that they didn't add much more refinements, such as more flexible camera controls, which were added to a lot of the other PSP ports that Nippon Ichi have created. It is nice to see that they added the cutscene skip function, first introduced in Disgaea 2 Dark Hero Days on the PSP. But after seeing what Nippon Ichi did to that game, I was expecting a lot more from the PSP port of Pucelle Tactics. Not only did I enjoy that the characters formed close bonds with each other and had great interactions, I really loved every single cutscene they had in this game, but I swear there was this one cutscene in the end that really impressed me, and really showed me what heart they put into this game. It was a cutscene of one of your party members' ship, who's an air pirate by the way, rising from the clouds, fully rendered in 3D, and for some reason I just thought that was really impressive. Of course there were more moments like that, and naturally I appreciated them just as much. I guess I'm just easy to sway with those kind of small details. Even the smallest details like ending the game earlier by defeating a stronger boss that you normally couldn't defeat on your first playthrough, which this game has, those kind of things just tip me off the edge, and it's really cool to see that they actually have them. It's that kind of ingenuity that you don't really see too often in other video games, and I guess that's why I appreciate them. The game is also no slouch with the mission variety. Although for the most part you'll see yourself fighting, you'll also have some missions where you, for example, will run away from an enemy, and so forth. The game is fast-paced as it is, so it's not really a problem if there isn't much variety, but the little there is of it is actually pretty welcome. The cast was comprised of a hot-headed, yet gentle to her friends, lead character Priye, her brother Colette, who is growing to become a man in his own right, Alouette, another girl with, prepare yourselves, amnesia. But wait, there's more. There's another guy with amnesia, and his name is Croy. And all of them blend together for a really solid team. as they progress to get more characters in their team, such as an air pirate known as Omard, and Princess Eclair, the previously mentioned Princess Crown-inspired character. With that said, I like what they did with the whole amnesia aspect, and in the end the chemistry between the characters really got me entertained.
I for one actually thought it was nice that they added a brother and sister kind of relationship in this game. I don't see that too often in video games, but when I do see it, I always think it's really cool.
Adding characters like Comard, who bears a striking resemblance to Vice in terms of his personality, and I'd say you got a really good cast of characters. I liked how natural the character interaction was, how you could see Priya, one of the main characters, grow to fall in love with one of the other characters, Croy, and how you start to see that other characters like Alouette and Calouette start to care for each other. The whole story starts to revolve around the topic of love, and a lot of characters do fall in love throughout the game, but the fact that you actually get to see how the characters grow to love each other is a very endearing thing.
The best part about how Nippon Ichi decided to approach developing these characters' relationships was excellent. Priya, for example, didn't just fall in love the moment she saw Croy. In fact, it dawned upon her way later, just as it did for you as a player. So I think the process just happened so naturally. It was definitely a nice way for the characters to grow, as I wasn't expecting them to fall in love in the first place. Just like with my favorite kind of JRPG stories, it managed to balance out the whimsical with the serious parts. The game could shift away from characters just casually talking to each other to a scene involving murder. And because of this fine balance, it managed to keep your attention for a longer time. I had no problem just keep playing and playing the story because it was so entertaining. And because the game is somewhat short, I managed to beat it in just about 3 sittings.
A very neat feature that is usually occurring in SRPGs, but not really so much in other Nippon Ichi RPGs, is that before you attack an enemy for the first time, each of the main characters will actually have something witty to say about the enemy. Prey usually just comments about how she wants to eat it, and I think that definitely adds something to the game overall. One certain thing that shows the game's age, which can both be a bad thing or a good thing, is the fact that when you equip characters with items now, you don't usually have the good old setup of having one slot for attack items, having another slot for defense items, and so on. In this game you can just throw on a bunch of attack items on all the slots, if you want to make a fighting centered unit. But not only that, all characters can equip all sorts of attack items. So there's no sword specific character or no gun specific character. Basically all the attack items serve as a buff for your attack stat, and same goes for all the other items. So you can pretty much boost everybody the way you want them, and getting stronger items is just a matter of upgrading your shop, which you do by buying more items. So it became a really natural circle in the end. This, depending on how you see it, will either make the game easier for you, because you have to think less, or it can make it feel really dated. Whichever the case might be, I actually enjoyed it. There was one more thing I'd like to mention about this though. I previously mentioned I wasn't a big fan of the later Nippon Ichi titles, mostly because of their writing. And when I found out that the PSP version came with another extra chapter, I was really afraid to approach it, and I haven't really touched it. Because in my opinion, the main campaign led me to a satisfying ending that I didn't really want to spoil. Even if the new chapter gave us a new ending, I'm just sort of afraid they'll soil all these old characters. But don't get me wrong, I still enjoy Nippon Ichi's new games for what they are. It's just, when you have this kind of good game, you'd rather just want to leave it this way rather than taking too many risks. And besides, by this point in time I actually have a lot of other Nippon Ichi titles I have to get to, so maybe I can return to this chapter in the future. And that's pretty much Pucelle in a nutshell. It's cheap, but efficiently pulled off. It has a lot of great characters, some really fun and unique mechanics, and has an overall really strong story that actually ends on a bittersweet note. There's a lot of things I could say about this game, and it definitely trumps a lot of other Nippon Ichi titles that came out after it. I sincerely hope you guys could try it out someday. After all, you can get it on the PSP now with the fan translation in place.
Considering how many Disgaea games I've played in the past, I think it's only fair that I got back to the origins. And you know what? There's only more of it in store. So you guys, see you next time, and get gaming.
Hey guys, have you gotten gaming yet? If not, check out Senkai's unboxing of Kingdom Hearts 2.5 HD Remix. And if you want to watch another review, check out the one before this one, Steins Gate, which is an excellent visual novel game. And hey, if you have some spare time, why don't you check out our collaboration video with Aerodynamish on his channel. Thanks once more for watching, you guys.